Hello and welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to talk about a material that is quite literally everywhere: plastic. We use it all day, every day. But our relationship with it, well, it's complicated. It's not just some inert substance. It's become a partner in our modern lives, for better and for worse.
And you know, this quote just nails it, doesn't it? Plastic is this Janus-faced companion. It's two-faced. It's the hero of our story, and at the very same time, the villain. It's a material that opens up these dazzling possibilities, but it also gives us this deep, nagging anxiety about our planet.
So that's the big question, right? How did we get here? How did this miracle material, which was actually invented to save nature, to replace things like ivory from elephants and shells from turtles, end up becoming one of the biggest threats nature faces? That's the journey we're going on today.
All right, so here's our roadmap. We're going to break this story down into 5 parts. First, miracle or menace. Then, a world without limits, followed by the price of progress. After that, we'll dig into an unbreakable legacy, and we'll finish up with closing the loop.
Okay, let's start at the very beginning. We're going to wind the clock all the way back to the 19th century. This is where, kind of ironically, a real desire to protect the natural world actually sparked the invention of the very first plastics.
So check this out. This slide gets right to the heart of the problem plastic was meant to solve. We were running out of stuff. Natural materials like ivory for billiard balls and tortoiseshell for combs were getting incredibly rare and expensive. In fact, back in 1863, a company offered a $10,000 prize to anyone who could invent a substitute for ivory. The guy who came closest? An inventor named John Wesley Hyatt, who created celluloid. And suddenly, you had a material that was abundant, cheap, and you could make it into almost anything.
So what's the secret sauce here? Well, it's all in the chemistry. Plastics are made of polymers, these huge, long, beautiful molecules. One scientist actually described a polymer molecule as being like looking at a cathedral that goes on and on for miles. And it's that incredible structure that gives plastic its almost magical ability to be molded and shaped into, well, anything we can dream up.
And this was a total game changer. In 1907, with the invention of bakelite, we weren't just imitating nature anymore. We were creating entirely new materials from scratch, from things like coal tar. People called it a fourth kingdom of matter. For the first time, we weren't limited by what we could find in the animal, vegetable, or mineral worlds. We could invent our own, promising this future of democratic luxury where everyone could afford beautiful things.
So after World War II, with these incredible new materials at our fingertips, things just exploded. This was the golden age of plastic. It poured into our homes and completely transformed everyday life with cheap, colorful, and super modern designs.
You can imagine designers were just ecstatic. Plastic gave them a sense of freedom they had never had before. But as the famous designer Charles Eames pointed out, that freedom was also a trap. He called plastic a spineless material because it put up no resistance. You could make something incredible with it, but you could also make something truly awful just as easily. All the discipline had to come from the designer, not the material.
And then you get to 1967. And this one scene, this one word, from the movie The Graduate just perfectly captures the moment the tide started to turn. Suddenly, that word plastics, which used to sound like the future, just sounded, well, phony, cheap, and totally uninspired.
You can really see on this timeline how fast public opinion shifted. What was once seen as democratic and modern in the 50s was suddenly conformist and fake by the late 60s. This was happening right as the environmental movement was being born. Plastic's ability to imitate other materials started to feel, well, just ersatz. And its greatest strength, the fact that it lasts forever, was starting to feel less like a feature and more like a curse.
Okay, to really get a grip on plastic's global impact, let's do something fun. Let's follow the life of a single, simple object that pretty much all of us have thrown around at some point, a Frisbee.
The journey here is just fascinating. It starts as these tiny polyethylene pellets, worth less than a single penny. It gets shipped to a factory, molded, packaged, branded, shipped again, and by the time you or I buy it in a toy store, that same piece of plastic is worth $8. It just goes to show the massive global economic engine that's built around turning these cheap raw materials into the stuff we buy.
But, you know, there's a human story behind that price tag. The low cost of so many of our plastic goods is built on a system of migrant labor. In huge manufacturing centers, workers like Huang Min Long leave their homes and their families, living in factory dorms and working incredibly long hours to make the very toys that fill our stores. And this leads us right into plastic's biggest contradiction. Its tragic flaw, really. The very thing that makes it so useful, the fact that it's so tough and durable, is also what creates its biggest problem. It basically never goes away.
Now, this chart is, honestly, it's pretty sobering. Take a look at Europe, which you'd think would be leading the way with this stuff. Even there, less than a third of plastic packaging actually gets recycled. About 30% is burned for energy, and the biggest chunk, 41%, is still just getting buried in the ground.
And here's something really important to get our heads around. A lot of what we call recycling isn't really recycling at all. It's what's known as downcycling. That clear plastic soda bottle doesn't become another clear soda bottle. It gets turned into something of lower quality, like fibers for a carpet. Now that's useful, for sure, but it doesn't close the loop. It means we still have to keep making brand new virgin plastic from oil.
So, what can we do about this? Well, there's this really powerful idea that's gaining ground called Extended Producer Responsibility, or EPR. The concept is actually pretty simple. What if the company that makes a product was also responsible for what happens to it at the end of its life? As one expert put it, you make it, you deal with it. This gives companies a huge incentive to design products that are actually easy to reuse or recycle right from the start.
Okay, so for our final chapter, let's look ahead. How are we trying to fix this complicated relationship with plastic? And maybe, just maybe, finally close that loop. You've got huge players like Coca-Cola that are definitely feeling the pressure. And they are investing a lot of money. They're building massive plants for true bottle-to-bottle recycling. They're also exploring bioplastics like their plant bottle. But, and this is a big but, critics will tell you that these same companies often use their influence to fight things like bottle deposit laws, which are proven to get recycling rates way, way up. It's complicated.
So what about bioplastics? Making plastic from plants instead of oil. Sounds perfect, right? Well, as this slide shows, it's not quite that simple. Yeah, the carbon footprint is lower, which is great. But here's the catch. Whether a plastic is biodegradable depends on its chemical structure, not where it came from. A plastic made from corn isn't automatically compostable. Plus, these new materials can sometimes contaminate the existing recycling streams we already have.
And when you really step back and look at the whole picture, you realize that all these technological fixes, they can only do so much. The much bigger problem might just be our culture. We've developed what one person called a one-night stand mindset with our stuff, especially plastic stuff. We use it once for a few minutes, and then we throw it away without a second thought. And changing that mindset, well, that's a whole different challenge.
So that's where we'll leave it, with this big question for all of us to think about. Is the real solution a better plastic that we can invent our way out of this problem with? Or do we need to do something much harder and fundamentally rethink our entire relationship with consumption and this throwaway culture that plastic helped create? There's no easy answer.